Imagine this, a vast icy frontier dismissed as nothing more than a barren wasteland. Against all doubts, the United States boldly purchased Alaska from Russia, and the deal was quickly branded as Seward's Folly. But what if this so-called folly was actually a stroke of genius? Behind the mockery and headlines lies a captivating tale of strategy, survival, and vision. This is a story that weaves together ancient indigenous cultures and imperial ambitions of Russia and America's relentless pursuit of opportunity. Far from being a frozen mistake, this bold move reshaped the destiny of a nation and the balance of power in the world. So are you ready to uncover the truth? Let's dive into the story right now. Alaska, a vast land with immense size and diverse landscapes, holds a unique place in the American imagination, covering an area of 665,384 square miles, which is 1,723,337 square kilometers. It is the largest state in the United States, accounting for 16% of the nation's total land area. To put this into perspective, Alaska is larger than the combined size of Texas, California, and Montana all together, the next three largest states. Despite its massive size, Alaska has a sparse population of about 732,000 residents, making it the third least populous state after Wyoming and Vermont. Its geographical extremes are also noteworthy. It's not only the westernmost state but also the easternmost, thanks to the Aleutian Islands extending into the eastern hemisphere. On a clear day, from certain points along the Barren Strait, one can even see Russia across the sea, a striking testament to Alaska's proximity to another world power. Since its colonization by Russia in the 1740s, Alaska has been a land of allure for fortune seekers. Its history is marked by a series of booms and migrations as outsiders flock to exploit the state's natural resources, with many striking it rich through gold, fur, and more recently oil. However, it is also home to indigenous cultures and have adapted to life in this rugged land for thousands of years. Long before Russian explorers set foot in Alaska, the region was inhabited by a mosaic of indigenous peoples who had adapted to its harsh climate and challenging terrain. Today, Alaska's indigenous population, making approximately 15% of the state's residents, the highest proportion in any U.S. state, includes groups such as the Aleut, Tlingit, Athabascan, and Inuit, formerly known as Eskimo. Anthropologists believe that during the last ice age, around 30,000 years ago, a land bridge called Beringia connected Asia and North America across what is now the Barren Strait. Glacier expanded and sea levels dropped by as much as 300 feet, which is 91 meters. This landmass served as a gateway for ancient hunter-gatherer groups who crossed over into the Americas and settled the unoccupied land. Eventually dispersing throughout North and South America, they spread far and wide, with some moving south to become the ancestors of Native Americans. The indigenous cultures of Alaska developed sophisticated means of survival in their environment. For an example, the Aleut were skilled sea hunters who invented the kayak and relied heavily on marine life. The Tlingit, known for their distinctive totem poles, resided along the southern eastern coast and participated in complex social and trade networks. The Athabascan, talented hunters of moose and caribou, roamed the vast interior, while the Inuit adapted to Arctic conditions in the north. Russian interest in Alaska began in earnest during the 18th century, fueled by the nation's eastward expansion across Siberia. The Promyshelniki, Russian fur traders and explorers, played a crucial role in this movement, driven by the lucrative fur of trade, particularly in sable pelts. These frontiersmen pushed the boundaries of the Russian Empire to the Pacific coast. In 1728, Vitus Bering, a Danish explorer in Russian service, embarked on an expedition that would lay the groundwork for Russian claims to Alaska. Although his initial voyage didn't reach the Alaskan mainland, his subsequent expedition in 1741 successfully landed on a small island of the coast, now known as Bering Island. Tragically, Barren and much of his crew succumbed to scurvy and other ailments. But the survivors returned with valuable sea otter pelts, igniting a fur rush that would shape Russian activities in the region for decades. The Russian presence in Alaska was characterized by the establishment of trading posts and settlements, often under the auspices of the Russian-American Company, which is also referred to as RAC, which was granted a monopoly over hunting, trading, and mining. The RAC's influence extended across the Aleutian Islands and onto the Alaskan mainland, where they founded settlements like Kodiak Island and Sitka, the latter becoming the capital of Russian America. The Russian approach to colonization was heavily focused on resource extraction, particularly the fur trade. The RAC's operations were marked by harsh treatment of indigenous populations, mirroring practices established in Siberia. Native Aleuts were often coerced into labor, with men aged 18 to 50 conscripted as hunters for the company. The Russians imposed a tribute system, demanded excessive hunting quotas, and introduced devastating diseases like measles and smallpox, leading to a dramatic decline in the Aleut population from an estimated 10,000 in 1741 to just 2,000 by 1800. The RAC's ambitions extended beyond Alaska. They established outposts as far south of Northern California and even attempted to set up a presence in Hawaii, then known as the Sandwich Islands. However, logistical challenges, limited resources, and competition from other colonial powers hindered these efforts. Despite the initial profitability of the fur trade, Russian America faced numerous obstacles. The vast distances and harsh climates made communication and supply lines with the Russian mainland tenuous at best. Supply ships from Russia arrived infrequently, sometimes only once every 2 or 3 years, forcing the colonists to rely on trade with other nations, particularly the United States. American merchants from New England saw opportunities in Alaska, engaging in a triangular trade of furs, whaling products, and goods exchanged with China. This growing American presence introduced competition and tension as Russians grew wary of American influence among indigenous populations and their provision of firearms to natives, which could disrupt the fragile balance of power. Furthermore, overhunting led to a significant decline in fur-bearing animal populations, diminishing the profitability of the RAC's ventures. The sea otter, once abundant, was hunted to near extinction in the region. The economic challenges coupled with geopolitical pressures began to erode the visibility and the viability of maintaining Russian America. By the mid-19th century, Russia's priorities were shifting. The Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, exposed the empire's military and economic weaknesses, particularly in comparison to the rapidly industrializing powers of Western Europe. The war ended in a defeat for Russia, compelling the nation to reassess its foreign commitments and focus on internal reforms. Tsar Alexander II, who ascended to the throne in 1855, initiated a series of transformative challenges, including the emancipation of the serfs in 1861. Russia recognized that it lacked the resources and infrastructure to effectively govern and develop Alaska, especially in the face of potential conflicts with other powers, such as Great Britain and the United States. Additionally, the dwindling returns from the fur trade and the potential threat of losing Alaska without compensation either through encroachment by British Canada or a possible American seizure made the idea of selling the territory increasingly attractive. Russia preferred that Alaska not fall into British hands, given the long-standing rivalry between the two empires. For the United States, the idea of expanding its territory aligned with the doctrine of manifest destiny, the belief that the nation was destined to expand across the North American continent. Figures like William H. Seward, the U.S. Secretary of State under President Abraham Lincoln, and Andrew Johnson were vocal advocates of American expansionism. Seward, a former governor of New York and a prominent abolitionist, had long envisioned the United States stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific and beyond. He saw Alaska as a stepping stone toward further territorial acquisitions, including a potential annexation of Canada. Seward believed that the United States and Russia shared common interests and enemies, notably Great Britain, and that acquiring Alaska would strengthen America's strategic position. In 1866, Tsar Alexander II authorized his minister to the United States, Edward Steckel, to explore the possibility of selling Alaska. Steckel found a receptive partner in Seward, who was eager to expand American territory despite the nation's preoccupation with Reconstruction after the Civil War. Negotiations progressed swiftly and discreetly. On March 30, 1867, after several rounds of discussions, the United States agreed to purchase Alaska for $7.2 million, roughly 2 cents per acre. The treaty stipulated that the United States would not assume any prior obligations of the Russian-American company, effectively dissolving the entity. The transaction was conducted with a sense of urgency and secrecy, partly to preclude any interference from Great Britain and to minimize domestic opposition. Seward anticipated that the acquisition would be well received by the American public, given the prevailing expansionist sentiment. Contrary to popular belief, the immediate reaction to the Alaska purchase wasn't one of widespread ridicule. While some critics derided the acquisition as Seward's Folly or Seward's icebox, the majority of Americans viewed it positively. Newspapers like the New York Times hailed the purchase as an important annexation, and many citizens saw it as a natural extension of the nation's manifest destiny. The myth of universal mockery likely emerged later, as historians sought to create a narrative of initial skepticism, followed by vindication after the discovery of Alaska's rich natural resources. In reality, the acquisition was generally welcomed with enthusiasm for the potential economic opportunities and the strategic advantage it provided over rival powers. The transfer of Alaska from Russian to American control had profound effects on the indigenous populations. Under Russian rule, native peoples had endured exploitations and oppression. But the transition to American governance didn't alleviate their hardships. The U.S. military administration, led by figures like General Jefferson C. Davis, no relation to the Confederate president, often treated indigenous communities with hostility and violence. Davis's tenure was marked by conflicts with the Tlingit and other native groups, accusations of treachery and acts of retribution, including kidnappings and massacres, were part of a broader pattern of disregard for indigenous rights and autonomy. Native Alaskans protested the legitimacy of the sale, but without legal standing or recognition, their grievances went largely unaddressed. Alaska's development under U.S. control. In the decades following the purchase, Alaska underwent significant changes. The discovery of the gold in places like Juneau, Nome, and Fairbanks sparked waves of migration and economic activity. The Klondike gold rush of the late 1890s, centered in the Canadian Yukon, but accessible through Alaska, further cemented the region's reputation as a land of opportunity and adventure. The influx of settlers brought both development and challenges. Towns sprang up rapidly, often lacking basic infrastructure and governance. Lawlessness, vice, and social ills were common, leading to efforts to establish order and, in some cases, enforce moral codes through measures like prohibition. In 1912, Alaska was officially organized as a U.S. territory with its own legislature. The territory became a focal point for strategic military planning during World War II, given its proximity to Asia and its potential as a staging ground for operations in the Pacific. Alaska's value extended beyond its natural resources. During the Cold War, the territory's location made it a critical component of America's defense strategy against the Soviet Union. Military installations were established, and infrastructure was developed to support both defense and civilian needs. The discovery of oil in Prudhoe Bay in 1968 and the subsequent construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System transformed the state's economy. Oil revenues became a significant source of funding for Alaska, enabling investments in public services and infrastructure while alleviating the tax burden on residents. the Alaska Purchase has had enduring implications for both the United States and Russia. For the U.S., it represented a successful expansion of territory that provided strategic advantages, abundant natural resources, and a new frontier for exploration and settlement. Alaska's statehood in 1959 solidified its place in the Union, and it continues to hold a unique position in American culture and identity. For Russia, the sale of Alaska is often viewed through the lens of historical regret and as an example of the challenges faced by the empire in managing distant territories. Myths have arisen, such as the notion that Alaska was leased rather than sold, or that the transition can be nullified, a reflection of the complex feelings surrounding the loss of the territory. The true story of Alaska Purchase is a complex blend of strategic calculation, economic necessity, and the interplay of global powers. This transaction was not a folly, but a deliberate discussion aligned with America's expansionist goals and addressing Russia's practical concerns. Understanding the real reasons behind this purchase offers a clear perspective on this pivotal moment in history. Alaska symbolizes the spirit of frontier exploration, where natural beauty meets the challenge of survival. Its history is intertwined with the resilience of indigenous peoples, the ambitions of empires, and the evolving identity of a growing nation. What was once considered a gamble became a defining chapter in America's story, proving that bold decisions can yield great rewards. This land continues to inspire, reminding us that daring moves can create enduring legacies.